You can see that on my Ubuntu host I've moved into the directory /var/cache/bind. Remember, this was the directory that we were pointing to with the directory directive within the options file. When I look in this directory using ls-l, I've created then the db.10.0.2 and the db.example file, and they are group owned by the user bind. Don't forget that once you've created these, then to change the ownership of the file. When we look at our main example file, so if I go through and use the cat and then db.example, we can see very much in the same manner as we saw within the slides, we have the details laid out here. Remember I said when defining the start of authority, we must start the opening parentheses on the same line that we define example.com. So this then allows us to spread the single resource record, the start of authority record, over multiple lines. And remember what we said about the comments? The semicolons are comments. So the closing parentheses is after the negative TTL. It has to be on a new line. So if we then run through vi and db.example, where I put the origin in, we can also use the origin in places like this. I've put example.com, but we could go through and do something like this and put just the @ symbol in there. In the same way, where we have the example.com here, for both the mail server and the name server, I could again use the @ symbol. I prefer to use example.com because it really does then make the record that little bit more readable, even though it takes up the extra space. But you're going to find lots of example files where the @ symbol is used. And don't forget, when we're putting in domain names, that we put then example.com. That shows that we're using the full path through to the name, as opposed to something like this, where we've just got master. So with no dot at the end, so we're actually then going to apply the origin value to the end of this. So this is going to become master.example.com. We again could write the full value here, but I think it becomes readable enough accepting the origin value here. We don't use the @ symbol at the end, it's only when we're replacing the whole name are we going to use the @ symbol. With that saved, we can go through and check our syntax. So we can go through and run named, check zone this time, and the zone then, well, based on the name that we gave it in the configuration file. So this is going to be example.com. and then the file db.example. So we can see that with no problems there, we've been able to read our serial number in. The serial number is date based, so 2015, 11 for November, 21 for the 21st, and then 01 indicating it's the first change today. When we look at the reverse lookup, again, we have similar information, but we are now using the reverse lookup zone. You can see that even though we have the readability, it's adding in quite a lot of awkwardness just having to type this and get it correct. If we wanted to, we could go through then and replace this quite easily and almost acceptably, even in my case where I don't particularly like using it, with the @ symbol. We can do that for both the start of authority record and for our name server record. There's nothing stopping the name server being master.example.com. We don't have to have a specific name server for each zone. It doesn't need to be tabbed in, but if we want to tab this in just to make it more readable, then we're welcome to. With that saved, we can go back and run our named -check zone, And this time we've got to put it the way we specified, so not exactly the same as in the file. This is going to be then 2.0.10.in-addr.arpa, and then point through to our file. So again, that appears to read OK. We could also check all of our zone files by running through the named -check conf and use the -z option. So you can see then that we've read in all of our zones, but just check the example and then the two, they're the ones that we created. And of course they've got the larger serial number that we're using then, a more organized serial number than just simply 1 or 2. Now of course when we're running the check zone or the check conf, we are running then as our root user. We haven't used sudo. So consideration is to use sudo when running these, because then we can actually check the bind user's privileges. So we could use something like sudo -u bind. So running through as the bind user here with sudo, we can actually check that the bind user has rights to everything. That's through then to the configuration file and through to the zone files. So this is really important and something that you should always consider when testing your scenario. We can then go through and restart the service. So I'm just going to use rndc and reload. So that's successful. So we now should be able to use then host and mail.example.com. And then if we reverse that, so that's gone through and looked in our example.com zone. But if we now go through and look for 10.2.2.2, we're then doing our reverse lookup. So you can see then that it's working in both directions. So our system is fully up and running. Now of course when I've set up my reverse lookup zone here, I did use then addresses that matched the address range that I was using. If you're using this on your own systems, then of course you've got to make sure you're using an address range that suits your network addresses. Now that we've been able to see our DNS server working, in the next video we're going to look at how we can auto-generate some entries or resource records.